from Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Tuesday, July 18th. This is Africa 54. Russia's withdrawal from the Black Sea grain deal with Ukraine sends shockwaves across some of the world's poorest countries. And a new report by UNAIDS says significant progress has been made to combat HIV/AIDS since the peak of the epidemic. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. Just one day after Russia announced it was withdrawing from the Black Sea grain deal with Ukraine, Ukraine says that its forces shut down Russian drones and cruise missiles targeting the Black Sea port of Odessa. Meanwhile, the cancelling of the grain deal is sending shockwaves across some of the world's poorest countries. Trevor Carroll reports.
This is the Bakara open grain market in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. The country has been one of the biggest beneficiaries of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, a deal brokered by Turkey and the United Nations in July 2022 that allowed Ukrainian grain to leave Black Sea ports. It helped bring down global food prices and allowed aid agencies to access hundreds of thousands of tons of food at a time of rising need and scarce funding. But now, with Russia pulling out of the deal, there's uncertainty in Somalia and some of the world's poorest countries. Shashwat Sarif is with the International Rescue Committee for East Africa.
We have seen the positive impact that the Black Sea grain deal has had for many nations, especially for nations in East Africa. More than 600,000 tons of food was procured by WFP and moved to countries that were in dire food need in Afghanistan, in Yemen, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, Sudan.
Sarif says it's important to keep the grain flowing because not only does the disruption limit access,
even if there is access, there is a problem with affordability because of increase in prices.
Moscow said on Monday that it was quitting the pact because its demands to improve its own exports had not been met. Russia has also complained that not enough grain reached poor countries. The UN counters that those states benefited as the deal helped lower food prices more than 20% globally. Analysts say prices for some staple foods will likely rise as a result of Russia's decision. But global grain availability has improved since the start of the war due to greater supplies from producers like Russia and Brazil.
Trevor Carroll of Reuters filed that report. For more on this new development, I'm joined live from New York by VOA's United Nations correspondent, Margaret Bashir. Margaret, what's the reaction so far from the UN following Russia's refusal to extend the UN brokered deal?
Well, Esther, the Secretary General is, of course, extremely disappointed that Russia has backed out. You know, they've threatened to do it before. This deal is periodically renewed every 60 or 120 days. And so we've been in this position before, and they haven't backed out. But this time they did. And so Secretary General Antonio Guterres, very disappointed. He's tasked two of his most senior people in the UN to negotiate this project from the very beginning, over a year ago from when it was conceived. And the UN has staked a lot in this, their time, effort, and its reputation. So the Secretary General, very unhappy. 345 million people in the world are facing hunger. We don't need there to be less food supply in the markets.
Margaret, so what does the UN say might be the impact of Russia's stance, first for Ukraine and second for Africa?
Sure. Well, as a consequence, people are going to be paying higher food prices, and there could be availability issues. But primarily, it's about the food affordability, as we heard in the package. And in fact, on Monday, on news of Russia's withdrawal from the deal, wheat, corn, and soybean prices did jump a few percentage points on the global commodity markets. So the markets are now a little bit nervous. And, you know, when prices go up, that makes food expensive, not just for you and me, but also for aid agencies like the World Food Program. Now, they're already facing funding shortages in many of their programs around the world. They're already cutting rations to people because they don't have funding. And now they're going to have to try and scramble and possibly find new suppliers because they bought a lot of their grain and cereals from Ukraine. So this will add extra expense for them and logistics problems and so on. So it could really impact some of the world's most vulnerable people if there's an availability problem and an affordability problem. So, but in the longer term, we just don't want to see prices remain high on global markets because that will trickle down to everyone in Africa, in Western Asia. These are big markets for Ukrainian grain and everywhere because we're all impacted by it. Bread, pasta, these sorts of staple foods, the prices will start to rise.
Margaret, thank you very much for that update from the United Nations. VOA's UN correspondent Margaret Bishia live for us from UN headquarters in New York. Libyan border guards have rescued dozens of migrants left in the desert without water and food by Tunisian authorities. Hundreds of migrants have fled or were forced out of Tunisia's Sfax city after racial tensions intensified following the killing of a Tunisian man earlier this month. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
Migrants from sub-Saharan Africa were forcibly taken to hostile areas bordering Libya and Algeria. Abu Kuyin, who arrived in Tunisia 7 years ago, was apprehended in Spain last week and put on a trial.
The Tunisian police caught me with my wife and asked for the papers. We showed them and they picked us up and put us in a truck. I asked, "Where are you taking us?" They say they want to throw us in Libya. But what do we do to get sent to Libya? They said, "We don't need you here in Tunisia."
A team of Libyan border agents encountered migrants who were visibly exhausted and dehydrated. They were sitting or laying on the sand using shrubs to try to shield themselves from the scorching summer heat that topped 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The group are located in a desolate area close to Al-Shahar, a town near the Tunisia-Libya border, nearly 150 kilometers west of Tripoli.
When we got to the border, they made us sit down. We were hit. I was beaten. I had surgery. They hit me there. They hit me there. They hit me there in the back. And they hit me there. They say they want to kill me because I'm black.
A group of women and children were receiving help at a reception center.
We face difficulties with the increasing number of immigrants arriving daily. Around 70 to 50 are rescued, and the numbers vary. Of course, we provide them with healthcare, some relief assistance, and first aid, given that some migrants cross the desert from Tunisia to Libya.
The port city of Sfax is a departure point for many migrants from impoverished and violent-torn countries seeking a better life in Europe by making a dangerous Mediterranean crossing often on makeshift boats. Tunisian rights groups say that between 100 and 150 migrants, including women and children, are still stuck on the border with Libya. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Now, a 4-day Women Deliver 2023 conference is ongoing in Rwanda. The conference has a special focus on gender equality, technology and innovation, as well as youth advancement programs. It also includes the private sector and grassroots advocates. For more on the conference, I'm joined live via Skype from Kigali, Rwanda by Noshaba Zafar, Senior Technical Advisor at Caros International. Noshaba, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you so much, Esther. Thank you so much for having me today here.
First of all, what's behind the name Women Deliver?
Yes, it's a very good question, Esther, because we all know that women and girls face gender equality issues across the globe. And GBV has no boundaries, no race, no color, and no age limitation. So women need spaces to connect and solutions to their challenges they face based upon their gender identities. So they need to stand together for solidarity to each other and share their stories. Women also need to catalyze collective actions to advance gender equality, hold leaders accountable and policymakers, and empower feminist movement and reframe who leads. So based upon all these issues, Women Deliver is one of the largest multi-sectoral global convening to advance gender equality and eliminate gender-based violence. And this time it is happening in Africa, in beautiful city of Kigali in Rwanda, with the theme Spaces, Solidarity, and Solutions. Because Women Deliver promotes a robust civic space for feminist actions, organizing, and mobilizing by creating spaces for critical dialogue, knowledge sharing, and networking.
How would you characterize how this is being addressed locally, right there in Kigali, Rwanda, when it comes to the issue of GBV?
Yes, because there are more than 6,000 women and young girls and some men and boys as our allies are participating in Women Deliver Conference. And we came to know that different organizations are working together to strategize how to address gender equality issues and gender-based violence overall. And some organizations adopt standalone approach to directly provide response to GBV survivors, and some of the organizations adopt integrated approaches. I would like to share my own organizational approach, which is Chorus International as one of the world's leaders for health system strengthening in most fragile settings, designs health programs with an integrated approach to address GBV issues. Because Chorus understands the magnitude of GBV, and we have developed an approach, a technical approach to address GBV, and this approach encompasses the basic and a very comprehensive that covers different dimensions of prevention, mitigation, and address and respond to GBV survivors. And to do that, we make social and behavioral change as one of our strong strategy. Additionally, we also work with national partners, national organizations, and local organizations, because we trust their indigenous knowledge, we trust their capacity, and we trust their analysis of their own issues. So they are the one who identify the issue, and they are the one, based upon their understanding of the context, come up with the ideas and solutions. And we backstop them with resources and with technical support. We work with our local partners hand in hand. And especially I would like to flag that our relationship with our partner organization across the globe is not based upon the project lives, but we are connected with them, we build their capacity, and we also learn from their experience that has more in-depth understanding of the ground realities. And another approach Chorus International adopts is engaging men and boys to address gender-based violence issues, because they should be our allies in this struggle to address the issues. And we also work with different stakeholders on the ground. These are some of the approaches we have designed, and we work together with different stakeholders. Thank you.
Noshaba, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed on what's happening on Women Deliver 2023 there in Kigali. Noshaba Zafar is a senior technical advisor at Chorus International. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18, 1918. Today is Nelson Mandela International Day, an annual day in honor of South Africa's icon of the fight against apartheid. VOA's Antonella Bruto spoke to South Africans in the diaspora to understand what Mandela's legacy means for a new generation.
Nelson Mandela would have been 105 years old today, but his legacy is still felt across South Africa's diaspora. For Cleo Loubser, an African youth fellow at Howard University here in Washington, D.C., Mandela represents a starting point from which young Africans like herself can build a legacy.
we are stepping into Madiba's visualization, or his dream of not waiting, right? It's not just, we're not waiting on the government to do things for us. It's that, it's this empowerment of, South Africa, stand up for who you are, and being able to say that we're not going to wait for you to free us. We're not going to wait for that anymore. We are going to take it into our own hands, and we are going to, as a collective, stand together for that.
For younger generations in the diaspora, Mandela's legacy of taking action offers a new perspective for South Africans to achieve the former president's goal of a harmonious and more prosperous South Africa for all those in the country.
The thing that inspires me the most is coming back to the sense of this idea of a rainbow nation. And it inspires me because I'm not at the point of just forgetting the past. And I think that's kind of what's been happening initially, was the idea of, apartheid happened like so long ago, like you guys should get over it, right? And it's like, no, it hasn't. We're still fighting for equity. And the idea of trying to dismantle all of these things that have been systematically oppressing us and coming together to daily create an equitable society for all of us, where all of us are kind of noticed for who we are and what we bring to the table, not just the few or not just a certain group, but that for everybody, this is South Africa for all of us.
Anthony Labruto, VOA News.
We'd like to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, we have some positive news to report on AIDS. Stay tuned.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we are focusing on the worst drought in northern Kenya in 40 years. We'll bring you a VOA Africa original documentary, Hunger Voices, Kenya's Food Crisis, which captures how drought is deepening a hunger crisis and wiping out livestock and crops in Kenya, Ethiopia and Somalia. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other African news, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's highly contested plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda is set to become law after the government defeated attempts by Parliament's upper house Tuesday to make changes to the legislation. The plan to deport asylum seekers has been criticized by some opposition and civil rights groups as inhumane, cruel, and ineffective. Israel is recognizing Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara on Tuesday, making it only the second country after the United States to acknowledge the kingdom's annexation of the disputed North African territory. Israel's foreign ministry says recognition of Western Sahara as Moroccan territory will strengthen relations between the countries. And Zimbabwean activists and opposition groups are calling the so-called patriotic bill signed into law by President Emmerson Mnangagwa a grave attack on fundamental freedoms and rights. The new law authorizes punitive measures, including the death penalty, for anyone found guilty of willfully damaging the sovereignty and national interest of Zimbabwe. Health professionals in Zimbabwe are leaving the country in droves for more profitable work abroad. The World Health Organization has added the country to its list of nations with a low ratio of doctors, nurses, and midwives to patients. The government is scrambling to stop the departures by better equipping hospitals. Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare.
The World Health Organization says Africa will have a shortfall of 5.3 million healthcare workers by 2030 if current migration to countries outside the continent is not contained. The exodus drags on health objectives and increases the burden on remaining workers, WHO says.
We need to address this by expanding opportunities to employ the health workers. We need to give health workers decent working conditions to be able to use their skills to deliver services to the benefit of the population, and in so doing, retain them in our countries here in Africa.
Zimbabwe is among the countries failing to retain healthcare workers. The WHO this year added Zimbabwe to its list of nations with low ratio of doctors, nurses, and midwives professions. The health workers cite poor working conditions and a lack of medicine and modern equipment as reasons for leaving. Dr. Paul is leaving Zimbabwe for Canada. He wishes to be identified only as Dr. Paul for reasons of personal privacy.
I'm leaving because I want to upgrade my life, I want to upgrade my career, I want to attain skills that I cannot attain in this country. And most importantly, I want to earn a life and a living that is favorable to my family.
Zimbabwe health workers have gone on strike on several occasions, but not much has changed. The government says it is aware of the situation and that it is trying to better equip hospitals to retain workers. Among the steps it has taken was the acquisition last month of 12 air ambulances.
So when you give them this, then it means they have a reason to stay. And whatever they are running to go and perform in the other parts of the world is available at home. So they will be able to perform their specialties and enjoy their profession here at home.
Whether those steps will be enough to retain medical professionals like Dr. Paul remains to be seen. Columbus Mavungam for VOA News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
It's time for Health Report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. Hello, everyone. A new report released last week by UNAIDS shows that ending HIV/AIDS is possible. Significant progress has been made to combat HIV/AIDS since the peak of the epidemic, and the number of new HIV infections globally in 2022 have dropped to its lowest point in decades, according to the report. Titled "The Path That Ends AIDS," the report contains data and case studies which highlight that the world can achieve an AIDS-free generation.
HIV responses succeed when they're anchored in strong political leadership to do four things: scale up evidence-based prevention and treatment services, tackle the inequalities that are holding back progress, enable communities to assume their vital roles in the response, and ensuring that sufficient and sustainable funding for HIV is in place to end the fight, but also to sustain the gains as we move into the future. Countries that are putting people and communities first in their policies and programs are already leading the world in their journey to end AIDS by 2030. For example, Botswana, Eswatini, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, these are countries that have already achieved the 95-95 HIV treatment targets, meaning 95% of people living with HIV in these countries know their status, 95% of people who know they are living with HIV are on life-saving antiretroviral treatment, and 95% of the people on treatment are virally suppressed.
That was Anjali Ashrekar, Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director of the Program Branch of UNAIDS. Now, observers say ending HIV/AIDS requires significant political will and sustained financial investment in children, youth, and families. Joining us now live via Skype from here in Washington, D.C. for more insight is Gail Smith, the CEO of the One Campaign. Ms. Gail Smith, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
So we have some good news with this report by UNAIDS. What does it take to stay the course?
You know, the news is really good, and let me just say a couple things about that. We're seeing the lowest infection rates ever. We're seeing some places in parts of Africa have reduced incidence of infection by 57%. So we've got all the evidence that we can succeed. What it takes going forward is a real investment of financial capital, and resources are robust, but they've fallen a little bit, and we've got to keep those resources flowing. Political capital, as you suggest, we're seeing the greatest successes where countries, where leaders, where empowered health ministers are out there putting the investment of time and real political capital in. And it takes one more ingredient, and that's real compassion.
Okay.
Because to get to the end of this epidemic, we've really got to focus on the people who are still in need.
So, Ms. Gale, did anything surprise you at all, especially when we know how much impact COVID-19 has had on health systems in so many countries, developed or underdeveloped?
There are a couple of things that have been really interesting, looking at the AIDS epidemic and then going through the COVID pandemic. One is that the fight against AIDS has really built up health capabilities in a lot of countries, right? Because in order to fight HIV, you need the capability to test, to treat, to monitor patients, to care for patients, to collect data. All of those capabilities built over the last 20 years proved to be very, very helpful in managing the COVID pandemic when that struck. So there's a residual gain of strengthening the health systems. But I think the other thing that is quite striking is that the world's fight against HIV/AIDS, while it started in denial, it started in stigmatization, and sure, there's still some, but it started from a place of negativity. It changed, and it's made 2 decades of progress because of a lot of compassion, because people understood the dangers of this epidemic, but also the need to stand together and fight for those who were infected and prevent infections from going to others. And I have to say, compassion has been a powerful fuel in this fight. I would say it was perhaps a little bit less evident during the pandemic.
And before we wrap, what is the last mile to get to an AIDS-free generation by 2030? I mean, we seem to be on the right path.
I think there are a couple things. One, we can't just claim victory now and stop. A lot of people think this is over. It's not. We've proven we can do it, so we've got to keep going. The second is to focus on those who are the most vulnerable. So, for example, a huge number of adolescent girls and young women in Africa are extremely vulnerable. Their infection rates are very, very, very high. So focusing on them, empowering them, protecting them, and making sure that these people who have still not been reached and still don't have the low incidence that we want are the focus of our attention.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Gail, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And that's our health report for today. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you very much, Lino. And please watch Lino Mudu's health reports every Tuesday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.